The following podcast is brought to you by XRE Art. XRE Art frames disassembled phones, handheld gaming consoles, and other electronics to create cool discussion pieces for enthusiasts. Go to the link in the description and use the offer code BrokenSilicon to support the channel and save 10% off on your purchase. And it is also brought to you by CDKoffer.com. Use offer code BrokenSilicon for 25% off Windows codes and Die Shrink for 3% off everything on the website. All right, let's get to the show. Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom. You know, I say gaming hardware because sometimes we talk about consoles or, anything that you can use that's a computer to game. But today it's specifically going to be enthusiast desktop talk, I think, with this guest. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me. My name is Wallace Santos. I'm the CEO and founder for MAINGEAR. Also a hardcore enthusiast for decades now, which is crazy, but started the business when I was 18 years old.
You know, I'd say especially lately, half of my guests are people that kind of reach out via email. They're like, oh, I'm someone that works on, these types of FPGAs. Oh, I'm someone who customizes these systems. And you were one of the people that reached out to Broken Silicon or Alex did for you. I mean, what made you reach out? I'm always really curious, genuinely, about what makes someone either discover Moore's Law is dead and even want to come on.
I'm personally a fan of your channel. I think I ran across your channel. It's a long time ago. You're around 7,000 subscribers, I believe. You're very small, but I thought your content and your approach was really interesting. And just to be quite frankly honest, you're like spot on with some of the roadmap you're talking about. And I'm like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I subscribed and I've been following you since. And then internally here, just speaking to my team, and they said, look, any podcasts you want to get on? And I'm like, hey, why not? Why not Tom's? Let's try Moore's Law is dead.
All right, so you've been following me for a while. That's very cool. I'm going to be honest too. When you reached out, I was like, oh, of course I want to talk to someone, who does what you do, is in charge of a company that makes gaming PCs. But I was a little apprehensive. I was like, oh no, I don't know if this is one of the good ones because I've always built my own PCs. And I'm going to be honest, Linus Tech Tips and Gamers Nexus have been really railing against half of the system integrators over the past 2 years. But as luck would have it, right when we locked it in that you were going to come on, Gamers Nexus put out a video where he said, you guys make decent PCs. So I was actually very relieved before I put out the reader mail requests for people to write in from the Patreon for you.
Oh, thank you, I guess. Also a big fan of
thank you. I wasn't sure if it was going to be before I looked you up.
I appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Steve as well. And, we were surprised to actually see that video. I guess I expected him to eventually buy a PC from us and go through his testing or through his methodology or through his review. But it was really good to see the outcome. We put a lot of effort into everything that we do, right? Like, I truly do it because I'm passionate about it. I used to be a really hardcore PC gamer. Now I obviously I don't have as much time, but I do still play PC games and But before PC gaming, I'm also like a hardcore like hardware enthusiast, right? I always, loved just the hardware space in general, the enthusiast hardware space in general. Used to follow guys like Kyle from Hard OCP religiously back in the day. And funny enough, he also had a consumer, an anonymous consumer buying program, which we passed with flying colors too at the time when we started our business. So.
Well, so now that we're going down this road, this is perfect. Like, where are you from? I mean, you can tell us as little or as much about your background as you want. What did you go to college? What did you study? Where are you from, and what was the path to starting this company?
So I'll give you my full background. I was born in Brazil. My parents immigrated to the U.S. when I was 2 years old. And the typical, American dream story, right? Went to school in a little town called Kearney, New Jersey. Right, I'm a New Jersey boy all my life, pretty much. And after high school, I went to school for networking, NSP, Networking Systems Professional. I went to a school called Satone Institute. I think they're acquired by Lincoln Tech now. But I didn't want to go down the college route. For me, I didn't find it interesting at the time. I just really wanted to kind of perfect my craft at the time, which to me was networking, and then just go to work. Right, that was my whole goal. So got my NSP, started a company called Easy Tech. The idea was to, let me backtrack real quick. I couldn't find a job. I was too young. so nobody would really hire me, right? So I'm like, you know what? I'll just start consulting. And started Easy Tech like in 2002, September 2002. Within like 2 or 3 months, like I had a few of my friends, actually friends and family, right? Like call me up to, help set up their system or reformat their system or like build them a PC. But my goal was always to like, make enough money at the time, right? Mind you, I'm 18. Was to buy an Alienware at the time. So I'm like, I just really want this really beautiful gaming PC. I looked up to those guys. And the PC I bought it over Christmas. UPS actually damaged the PC, right? Let me not say UPS, the carrier. I don't remember who it was, if it was UPS or FedEx or whatever. The carrier damaged the PC on the way to me. And I called the company at the time, and they were giving me the runaround to get it fixed. You got it turned around so quickly, right? Like I paid so much money that I saved up for this brand new gaming PC, and all of a sudden this thing arrives broke. Sure, it's not their fault, but my problem is not getting solved, in a timely manner here. So I ended up taking it apart, right? Because I had some experience building PCs, right? But I wasn't definitely not an expert. So I took it apart. At the time, the video card dislodged or whatever, damaged the motherboard. I swapped the motherboard out and I did some stuff to it. And I got it up and running. But that was the catalyst. That was the thing that kind of like the light bulb went on in my head that said, wait a minute. You've built a few PCs for friends and family. You can do this shit. Like it's totally cool. Like you can totally do it. So I over the Christmas holiday, I ended up just like, kind of jotting all my ideas down. At the time, I, talked to my partner and we created a long list of names. I knew that obviously Easy Tech wouldn't work as a name for a brand, right? So I was always into like cool brands and stuff. And that's how we came up with MAINGEAR. It was one of the cool names that stood out for me that kind of described what it is, right? It's your main gear. And also the domain name was available, right? Like maingear.com. Just it wasn't .com available. So I registered that, bought a ticket to CES, and I literally went to Vegas without knowing anyone, just to shake hands and say, I guess I got to go to this show. At CES, my big break was Leo Laporte. He was signing autographs. I don't know if you know who he is, but it was Leo Laporte and Patrick Norton. They had a show on the Screensavers. It's called the Screensavers on Tech TV at the time. And I was standing in line for like an hour to get his autograph. And I said, once it was finally my turn, I said, I don't want your autograph, Leo. I actually want to get, I built the world's best PCs. And mind you, I hadn't built shit at the time. I would love to gift you a PC, man. That's all I want to do. And he looked at me and said, kid, I don't need your PC or your money. But I'll tell you what, you send me a PC, I'm going to give it away on my TV show. And I'm like, whoa.
Even better.
Even better, right? He's like, yeah. It's like, how about, basically he extended his hand and he wanted to help me, right? And he said, send it to my, here's my card. He gave me his cell phone number, his email address. And at the time, TV, it was a big deal, right? So I reached out to him and he's like, yep, mail it here. And he got back to me, right after CS or whatever. Like, here's the address to mail it to. It'll be in our show in X amount of weeks. But up until then, I still I didn't have a website. I didn't have like a proper product, manuals. Like I didn't have a method of actually shipping these PCs. I had to build a company in let me just say like a month or two. So like I had to, we register a 1-800 number. That was such a big deal back then. So I did all that, basically worked almost 24/7 to make that happen,
Mhm.
to ship him the PC. So we ship him the PC. It airs in the screensavers, and we instantly get traffic, and we instantly start to get phone calls like of people wanting to buy PCs. It wasn't like, it wasn't pouring in, but like all of a sudden we have action. And I'll never forget my first customer. His name was Fred. I'm not going to say his last name because out of respect for him. But my first customer, he called. Our first sale was a $4,000 computer in 2003. And I never thought I would sell a PC that expensive. And I remember, like, I felt so uncomfortable getting this guy's credit card over the phone to charge him for this PC. I'm like, sir, can you give me your credit card? He's like, absolutely. So he just gives me his credit card, we process his order, and we ship him his computer. So that was my first sale. It was very exciting. Official sale, right? Like as a MAINGEAR brand. And I'll never forget that one. So that's my story.
Yeah, let me change subjects here to, I think, what might be an interesting question, because you've been, I looked at your LinkedIn profile before we started recording, and I saw 2002, and that number stood out to me because that's 20 years ago. Like, so there's really been multiple eras of PC gaming you've seen, and I don't want to ask what's the difference between 2002 and now, because now is already, I think, a completely different era from 10 years ago. Like, what stands out to you as the distinct differences in like the PC gaming, maybe culture, just space itself, building a PC from 2002 to 2012, but then also 2012 to now?
So initially, at least when we started, PC gaming was a new thing, right? It wasn't really, it was really done by modders and enthusiasts and like at home, right? It wasn't like there wasn't like really a defined product category. I believe like companies like Alienware, companies like Voodoo PC at the time, and like Falcon. Those are the guys that like were pretty much like the only ones at the time. But and then you had some like other companies that were selling, like they were trying to appeal to PC gamers, and they're really defining the market because they were growing so rapidly. But they're selling these like really funky looking systems, like these dragon heads and these alien heads, and in my opinion, they're like very immature looking systems. They're very it looked like a toy, and I saw that as an opportunity because I always like clean aesthetics. So like
Me too.
yeah, I never liked like the crazy funky stuff that just looks like I don't know, like a dragon head on your desk. It just looks weird. And we thought there's a way to kind of like crack into the market by offering really clean, beautiful PCs that had automotive paint, and we were also one of the first to sell a liquid cooled gaming PC. Now, we definitely didn't invent it, right? I just want to be clear about that. It was these things were like mods that you would do at home, right? So I saw that as an opportunity to actually commercialize it. Like, can I ship a liquid cooled gaming PC? And in the beginning, it was very difficult. Like, we stumbled, man. I mean, we were shipping like aquarium pumps. We were using like Redline water wetter, like as a liquid.
As someone who runs my own business and has sold things before quite a bit online, I can't imagine wanting to have to handle support for liquid cooling, to be honest.
It was like a nightmare. But I was passionate and enthusiastic, and I never wanted to give up on it because I felt like that was a really good way to cool a PC, right? I mean, we've even gotten as far as selling at the time. AC Tech, they had this like compressor, like phase change system. We've even sold a phase change PC, which was kind of crazy a couple times. But that's kind of how we got going, man. We basically we always tried to punch above our weight and really, be innovative, right, as much as possible within our constraints. But
so you're saying like early 2000s, it was less well defined what the idea of a high end, a low end, a mid range is. There are just tons of components, and they all typically costed a lot. It kind of sounds like
I think most silicon manufacturers really there wasn't like a strong business case for PC gaming. I think Nvidia is the only one that had like the initial vision, I would say. Like, I don't want to give them too much credit either, but like, because it's obviously it's an effort that came from everyone. But I think they were the first ones to kind of like, really acknowledge it and enable the ecosystem. And then, so we saw like, the first 10 years, there's this like maturity level. And I guess this definition that happened of PC gaming, right? And then silicon manufacturers really started to take PC gaming seriously. And then, the next 10 years after that, I think that's when the market matured. I think there was a real market for it. I think that's when, like, Intel, for example, went from saying we're going to cancel the desktop CPU to saying, holy crap, like, we're going to lose a ton of money if we cancel desktop CPU. Let's not do that. The enthusiasts in PC gaming is too important. So and today it's just like, especially like after COVID, right? It's the growth was just explosive. I think it accelerated.
Oh, for sure.
Where we should have been, by at least 5 to 6 years, I would say. But it just matured. And now it's our form of entertainment, right? No matter how old you are, PC gaming is not just for a young gamer. I mean, everybody's a gamer. Like, it's if you're 40, 50, 60, if you're 15, or if you're even like 10 years old, you're playing Roblox and stuff. So it's just really, I just feel really fortunate to be able to experience, in the last 2 decades, like this process, right? This maturity process, and just, be part of the business, right? Be part of the space that's continually growing and evolving.
What's interesting too is I remember when like a couple years ago when my channel was really getting started, and I started transitioning more from just like reactions and eventually some types of leaks to also just kind of looking into the supply aspect, because I mean that's been such an important part of covering this space in the past year during COVID, is just really supply volume, what's going on here. And I remember when I started getting some people within the supply chain who were like, leaking to me some of the numbers of like what's actually sold every month. And I remember talking to my brother Dan, who's the co-host of every other episode of Broken Silicon. I was like, Dan, do you know how many cards are sold a year? And he's like, honestly, you could say any number. You could say 500,000. I'd be like, believe you. You could say 10 million. I'd be like, believe you. Like, I have no idea how niche this is. And I think like that's when we started learning, like, no, like it's a bad GPU launch if they don't ship 200,000 or like in the first week, and like they're shipping tens of millions a quarter. I remember one study recently that pointed to the fact that the idea that like everyone has a console in it and then they get a gaming PC if they're lucky is kind of actually wrong. That most people have a PC they used to game with, and in Europe and the West, consoles are actually more of a boutique device to complement the gaming PC they already have. That I don't know if people realize that gaming on a PC is pretty much the standard now. I think there's two different very polarized types of gaming on a PC. There's people like me who have a really nice one, and there's people that it's like, well, this was cheaper to build actually than a console. It's maybe not as strong, but it's what they could get their hands on. Yeah, I don't remember it being that mainstream though. Before 2000, I mean, I think it really, started becoming crazy mainstream in about 2010, and it just kept accelerating from there.
Yeah. Does it line up with when Twitch started to really become popular too? I think
that was probably part of it.
Yeah, I think like the being able to become like a streamer, and then other fans looking up to. It's almost like the sports thing, right? You see Michael Jordan playing with the cool sneakers, right? Like you want to buy the same sneakers. I think that's kind of this, what happened, right? When like Twitch really took off, was people opened their eyes and say, well, I really can't do this with the console. Or I'm not going to output the same quality, or I want to be just like my favorite streamer, right? And I think that's what happened.
I remember it's just 10 years ago, there were plenty of games that didn't run well above 60 because they were targeting 30 on the consoles. You hit 60 on PC, they were like, well, let's double the consoles. What do you have to complain about? But now that 60 is the target on consoles, I've just noticed that all games basically run well at 120 now. And now, which basically unlocks them to run even higher than that if you want it.
Yeah. I mean, most games are unlocked now, right? So like, you're right. It's good for the industry. And clearly, right? It's just a better experience. That's at the end of the day.
There were so many people who only gamed on console that were like, no, 30 frames is good enough. And then the second they got access to 60, they're like, yeah, we're wrong.
Yeah.
And, and just, again, I want to point this out. People forget Battlefield 2, one of the most popular online games, that literally couldn't go above 100. That was capped at 100. So there was a long time where this was quite a long road coming.
There was like either a patch or a hack that enabled you to uncap it, from what I recall. That's, old school.
So TurboDuck.net writes in, and he says, I think it's TubboDuck.net. He says, hi, Wallace and Tomit. And he says, it's a very poor attempt at a Wallace and Gromit joke. He says, well, I don't remember all of the outcomes except in Dell's case. Who could forget that? What was your reaction to the series of secret shopper videos produced by Linus Tech Tips, both in terms of how MAINGEAR was represented and also your industry as a whole? Did you find the videos insightful, entertaining, embarrassing for your peers? How would you respond to Linus Tech Tips community who saw the videos if you haven't already?
I think those, that series, it's essential for the space, right? I obviously, we were perceived as doing really well, at least from what I read from the community. I was definitely in the comment section of every video commenting, saying, "Hey guys, I'm here. Let me know if you have any questions." But I think LTT did a phenomenal job. Not just obviously reviewing the hardware, but also reviewing the full experience, right? It doesn't end at the hardware level or at the product level. It's the full experience is what happens when you need support. What happens when you try to purchase the product, or is this company going to try to upsell me or scam me or whatever. So it was refreshing to see that happen again, and those types of experience happened in the past, like in your typical editorial venues. But it was great to see, the actual experience on YouTube, and never mind that it was super entertaining, right? It was actually pretty awesome to watch. Now, mind you, we're all over here on our side, like, holy crap, what's gonna happen? I hope the PC didn't get their damage.
Yeah,
I hope something.
I'd be sweating bullets.
Yeah. I was sweating balls throughout the whole process. But at the end, I was just really happy to see that my team performed really, really well. The product was really good, and more importantly, the community perceived us as a good company. I think that's the most important part. And just to be clear too, man, I know some of the other CEOs of the other companies. They're not bad guys. I think in some cases, they might have gotten unlucky, right? But it was. I think it's an essential series, and I think a lot of companies made some adjustments after that as well, to their products or to their support or to whatever in their company to make sure that they offer a better product or better service.
Well, I skimmed the video too yesterday, and I remember your PC they thought was pretty well organized. They said generally good things, like you remember correctly. I do remember they said the SATA drive wasn't quite entirely plugged in, but it was connected, and so there wouldn't have been an issue. But then they did say your support would have helped them. So I will say though, there was almost an issue, but it wasn't, close to some of the stuff like the Dell one. They could not solve the issue. They had no idea what was wrong with the BIOS's firmware because they use a custom one. And my real question here is, what is going on though with some of the system integrators? Both, I think, a fair point to say with the way they're customized, just lopsidedly, and how low the quality, is. I've never had a stick of Kingston or G-Skill go bad, and I think they're pretty well known for reliability, especially Kingston. But I've had several OEM PCs have the RAM go bad. What is going on with the corner cutting, the way they organize some things? There's really 5 different ways I could attack this, but I wonder if you have any insight into why some of these system integrators and OEMs make such a lower quality product than the others when they're not. A lot of times they're cheaper, but not always.
The reality is it's a tough business to be in. It's a low margin, tough business to be in. Okay, so companies, in order to keep up or to keep their overhead, they're going to cut corners and they're going to want to sell more product, and they're just going to want to push metal out the door. That's an approach that I refuse to take. I've never taken. We were always in it for the long haul, and we literally qualify everything that we sell. So there's a reason why when you go to my website, I don't offer a gazillion different configurations. They're very limited. They're limited because we test everything. They're limited because I work with every single one of our partners to make sure that we're testing this stuff before it launches and that we're giving them feedback, debugging, etc. So and there's a reason why we always do well in these in these review roundups and stuff like that, because it's we're sticking to quality over quantity, right? Now, if you're in the business of pushing metal, it's going to happen to you, right? You're going to basically skimp on components. You're going to skimp on use the crappiest power supply you can use, because the consumer usually doesn't, or the regular consumer, they don't even understand what a power supply is, so they won't know about what brand or the components and using the power. Just know that they're buying 16 gigs of RAM with an RX or an RTX GPU with an Intel or an AMD CPU, right? That's kind of what they see. So, it depends on how how you want to run your business. It depends on how these guys choose to be in business. And now, in our case, we could have been a much bigger corporation much sooner by selling cheaper products and appealing to more people. I refuse to do that. I'm going to sell what I think I would want to buy, right?
And so you do limit the amount of motherboards you let people choose from and stuff like that. And I say that because, again, this was like a decade ago. But I remember looking at one system integrator, and they let me choose between like 20 motherboards and 10 different coolers. And I'm like, this just seems like a logistical nightmare to offer this many different things to people.
It's impossible to test all those combinations. When you put 20 motherboards with like 10 different kits of RAM, with like whatever, 15 different GPUs, and when you look at the different combinations and you actually you multiply everything, it goes into tens of thousands, right? And I'll tell you right now, it's impossible to test it. So you just have to kind of, it's a numbers game at that point. Just say, take your money, we'll build it, and we'll ship it.
And there can be weird combinations. I remember during the Fermi era, my brother had 560 Ti SLI, or at least he tried to, and then he could not get the flickering issue in a few games to go away. Eventually, what he did, I found some scheme of like selling one or trading with cash for a 460, use that as a physics card until he can sell that by itself. Like we had a whole way that we got him out of that situation. But I remember a few years later, I saw for his motherboard, I want to say it was an Asus, like the chipset in it, I believe was 970 FX. It was 970 something. And like it was just below the top end one, which I believe was the 990 back then for like a Phenom x4 or a pile driver. And I remember they had just put out a patch that said on Asus like 970 motherboards with this graphics card, SLI had flickering. And I'm like, so we couldn't have solved it. We weren't crazy. There were 2 years where just if you had that chipset from that manufacturer with that graphics card, it flickered. And I was like, it felt terrible because I just felt bad for him. But I'm like, we weren't crazy, Dan. We really couldn't have fixed the problem. They had to issue a BIOS update.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's and things like that, right? That's another beauty of being a smaller integrator, is just that, if we ran across an issue like that, we would immediately pause. Or if we didn't catch in our labs, right, we would immediately pause the sale of that board and qualify a different one and move from there. But look, there's things that happen. Like I said, it's a matter of how you support it. It's a matter of how you test it before you sell it. It's pretty simple, man.
So Kenahu25 writes in, and he says, when you got started, I guess you've already said what your first big deal is, so I'll skip that part of it. But he says, what was the hardest PC components you were trying to get your hands on? Thanks for all the both of you do. So yeah, like before 2010, was there issues getting certain components even at all comparable to now? And like, what was the hardest ones for you to get in bulk or something?
I mean, when we started, we didn't buy anything in bulk. But, I don't recall having issues with, let me quote unquote supply chain issues early on in our business. And plus, like PC, the enthusiast space wasn't this, hotness that it is now, right? So, pretty much like paper launches were pretty rare. And then, if we were selling something on our website, in the beginning, we normally did not carry inventory because we just couldn't afford to carry inventory, right? We would normally take basically payment for the PC and we would go and buy the components afterwards and then ship it out right within a reasonable time frame. Don't recall really having major problems acquiring hardware in the beginning.
It was
at least in the early
it was a
years.
buyer's market back then. I mean,
Yeah.
it was actually standard to my memory between like 2008 through 2013 to just a card comes out and you expect in a couple weeks it's $20 below MSRP.
Yeah.
Like that was just standard. You would expect that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Today's video is brought to you by CDKeyOffer.com. As I put together a new benchmarking station for 2022, I know that whether it's running Windows 10 or Windows 11, I will be getting that key from CDKeyOffer.com. And that's because it's a reliable, long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead that gets you reasonable prices on legitimate keys for these types of products. But it's really not all that they offer. They also can give you keys for Microsoft Office, keys for PlayStation codes, and even some of the latest PC releases like Elden Ring, a game that I'm enjoying quite a bit. Whatever you need, CDK Offer probably has you covered. And they're always running sales, but make sure you use the best code possible. And that's the ones provided for the Moore's Law is Dead fans. Moore's Law is Dead fans get the biggest discount. And if you go to the link on screen or in the description, you can use code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off Microsoft products and DieShrink to get 3% off everything else on the website. Using these codes really does help Moore's Law is Dead, and it helps you pay reasonable prices for games that you want and keys that, frankly, you just have to use half of the time. So, again, use the link in the description, use Broken Silicon, use DieShrink depending on the products you're getting, and pay reasonable prices for keys today at CDKeyOffer.com. Well, so tell me what it's been like during the recent shortages for your company, because like a question that I like to ask is, we had, increasing demand for these types of products under COVID, and then we had kind of like a weird paper launch. I would argue, I argued for literally fake launch with Ampere, all these delayed paper launches all over the place, and then a mining boom at the same time as silicon shortages. Like, it was really a perfect storm. When did you notice the market was truly in trouble for supply? Because it actually wasn't right away for most components. Like, when did you notice, we're going to have a huge issue here?
I noticed when there was an issue when FOMO started to happen. Like, our vendors and our distributors, they were saying, hey, buy product because, there's unprecedented demand. And it sucks because that causes even more issues, right? Like when you have all these companies like trying to buy as much product as they can afford to stock on their shelves because there's a crazy demand, it's going to screw up the supply chain because now everybody's freaking out, right? So like, that happened like shortly after, man, like after the lockdowns, like, we immediately saw like a rise in sales within like the first month of the lockdown, right? I think it was right around when people started to get the government checks, the subsidy checks, and it makes sense, right? People are stuck at home, can't leave your home. Like, how the hell are you going to entertain yourself besides, your television?
Especially during the winter, right? You can't travel. I did say that. Like, I understand why this is happening because I think a lot of people tried to blame a lot of different. Most of it was people were just willing to pay more, and if there was ever a time to overpay for a gaming device, it's when you're literally stuck inside during an unprecedented or almost unprecedented, at least for the past few decades, pandemic. Like, why? This is the time to overpay. I mean, what else are you going to do?
What are you going to do, right? Like, if you really need some entertainment, or if you need to communicate with the world, or if you need some access to the outside world, right, through a PC, you're going to buy what's available at whatever price it's available that you can afford. So that happened like rather soon, man. Right, like not long after the lockdowns, we started to see just like shortages, and all of a sudden, there's rumors about like there's not enough containers arriving in the U.S., right? And then that the rumors turned out to be true. Then we had some issues like, we ship, our chassis get assembled in China, right? Like the Bear chassis. And then we our chassis were delayed, and I'm like, shit, how do we solve this problem, right? And mind you, like, we're not this like ginormous corporation. Like, we're small compared to a lot of these big guys. And so we had to kind of like deal with all that, and then on top of all that, we had COVID itself. Like, how do we deal with the situation where like people don't want to be next to each other, right? How can you tell people to go to work? So and for me personally, combine all that. My baby was born in March of 2020. So like it was my first child, right? So like I'm freaking out, man. Like I just put a kid in this world, and like the business, there's like supply chain issues, and like how do you solve this problem? So we just we're one of those companies where we didn't let anyone go. Like I had zero. I said we're gonna stick by you guys just like you stuck by us, and we didn't let anyone go during that time. Everybody kept their jobs. And we said, we're going to shut down whenever the government tells us to shut down. If they don't tell us, if they don't deem us an essential business, then it is what it is. But I hope we stay open. And it turns out that the state of New Jersey actually did a really good job. They kept us open, and we kind of worked through it.
So I guess I'm wondering though if you saw what shifts you saw as the pandemic started. I'm guessing. At first, you were just getting more orders, probably of the typical stuff, right? But did you see them accelerate into certain types of PCs? Like, did they become more and more high-end towards the end of it? Or, like, I wonder how you saw trends change over this. And just when it comes to the shortages in general, I know they were happening before the launch of, like, Ampere and RDNA too, but there was this, even late into the year, you could get some things. I don't really feel like it was until 2021 that we really saw just prices double on everything.
Yeah, but actually, our ASPs definitely didn't go higher during that moment. It pretty much stabilized. It was about the same throughout the year, and we obviously we had the occasional customers that would call in and basically buy whatever we can ship the fastest. So if they have to spend more money to, and we had people call in and offering us to give us more money for parts, and can you get it to me sooner? Can I cut the line? And it was one of those moments where I had a really a serious conversation with my team. I said, guys, especially my sales team, I said, if you are opportunistic, if we act opportunistic during these times, we will be out of business when we get out of COVID. I'll tell you that right now.
Now, is it just a worry of a change of culture, or that people would hold you accountable for it, or that you would just get drunk on the wrong type of revenue?
Everything, right? Like I think, and people are not dumb, man. Like they remember, right? Like if you gouge someone for something, or if you act up in an opportunistic manner, they're not gonna stand by you forever. They're gonna say this guy, took advantage of me while or this company took advantage of me while they could, right? So screw them. So our goal was to just do our thing, right? Just do what we normally do. We have our margins that we normally go by. We need to obviously keep our overhead going, and let's not be opportunistic during these times here. And let's make sure that we support the people that always supported us. And we literally did not change anything. The only thing that changed was pricing, like pricing to us, right? Like we held our prices steady until we depleted the inventory at the prices that we bought it for. So that was never changed. But then obviously, we're purchasing from distribution, we're purchasing from vendors, and their pricing started to go up, and that's kind of we just had to continue to keep the margins where they are so we can stay in business.
Yeah, I think there's something to remember, that people remember. They may not feel like they've been taken advantage of initially. It's like, I know a lot of people that just buckled and bought like a 6700 XT for $1,000, and really that shouldn't be any more than 500.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I had to. I just want to play my games. This is usually a lot of people just gave up mid 2021. But then a lot of people kind of have done that recently. Not as many as before. I think people are becoming scared to buy anything right now. But what I've heard from my contacts at Micro Centers, they're just getting mass returns. And it's like, if you would have sold it for 10% above MSRP, they wouldn't have returned it. They would have been like, I paid over market, but not that much. But I think a lot of people who paid double, they're like, yeah, I'm not holding on to this for $1,000. Now, to be fair, though, to the people at Micro Center, I know that almost every graphics card sold from there was only about $20 to $30 above what they paid for it. So I know you may have paid $1,000 for a 6700 XT, but they paid $970 to get it to the store.
That's exactly what I was going to tell you. I was going to say, like, they definitely, and I work for, they're a very good partner of ours. They definitely did not gouge their customers, and they were probably making close to nothing per GPU, especially when when it's $970 out of their pocket.
I'm not shaming Micro Center, but it is,
they're a very fair company. But it sucks because not only Micro Center, everybody was paying that much for components, right? And obviously mining didn't help either, right? Or mining doesn't help, right? Like when there's shortages of GPUs and there's the rich miners that would pay whatever to keep their businesses afloat. It screws the market up a little bit.
Well, what do you think about like Nvidia just literally doing $40 million deals with billion-dollar mining firms in China and direct shipping them there? Because I got to say, the mom and pop shop that sells one GPU out the door here and there, and I know a couple other people that work at System Integrators, and one guy said he had a guy show up in like a Corvette and said, I will pay you $1,000 or 20% above what you're selling them for if you can just give me 100 GPUs. And he said no, because he wants to keep, like you, his customer base going. But I think the major issue isn't the guy, apparently, who has a Corvette and 100 GPUs in his garage. The problem is the mining firm writing their own BIOSes, hacking the cards immediately, and Nvidia directly supplying them with like $40 million worth of GPUs direct from the factory. Every one of those dies could have been a gaming card. I mean, I wonder what you think about that.
I really can't intelligently comment on that specific, question, just because I don't know. I can't confirm that they did something like that. But I can tell you that I have personally
I'll put it in the description, though. Oh, it's $30 million, to correct myself.
Yeah, I mean, look, and if at the end of the day, that's like a bleep in the radar for them, but in terms of sales, right? But
but that is 30 million and I did the math for one of my videos where I reverse engineered likely how many cards that is. That is like an entire quarter's worth of shipments to like one region for a mid-range card is what just went to a mining factory instead.
Possibly, man. I honestly, like I said, I can't intelligently speak to that or to as to why they did it. And I'm not defending any silicon manufacturer in here. I'm just saying like it is, right? I've personally met, the CEO of Nvidia, Jensen. I've personally been to his home, and I can tell you that.
Did you see the spatula room?
The spatula room. What spatula?
The one he does all of his presentations from in front of the oven with a bunch of spatulas in the background.
That's fake. That's not his real one. Looks close to that, but the one that you see the presentations, that's actually all digitally rendered.
What I've heard is that's actually based on one of his guest houses. I was wondering if you could confirm.
It's based
that.
on I do recall. Actually, I think I have it on my Instagram. I have a video where like him and Fish are like making some mojitos for us or something like that. But what I was trying to say is just that the dude is really he deeply cares about our space. I mean, so much that like he flew all the system integrators to his house to have a fireside chat, which was insane. Like you would think a guy like that would fly the CEOs of like HP, Dell, and whatever, right? But instead, he flew out, small system integrators to just have a conversation, which was cool. So, at least to me, he comes across as a person that really gives a crap about the space, and that shows through their support. And same goes to AMD, same goes to Intel. Like Intel has the board of advisors where I'm part of it, and literally we're talking about the enthusiast space every quarter. You're having a face to face, and obviously like. For example, like look at their latest 12th gen launch, right? Like where they did all these gaming events. Like they're committed. It seems like they really care about the community, and it's just great to see, man. And obviously, AMD is just AMD is gaming, right? Look, they're in every single console, and Lisa Su, she's a brilliant engineer, and so everybody's coming together. I don't think any of us or any of these silicon manufacturers are. Let's say they don't care about the gamers, right? It's got quite the opposite. I think they do.
Well, I mean, they're a business; they want to make money. And we can move on from it if you want to, but I do have to point out. So he flew you to his place to have a fireside chat, and then at the same time sold 30 million cards to miners. Yeah, you do see
don't
my
know
point, though, right?
I don't know if he did that, but okay, let's move on from here.
No, that's fair. But one point I had here, though, is I knew a lot of people at the time that were saying and recommending to just buy pre-builts to get a hold of the graphics cards. Did you? So it sounds like you had a lot of calls then, though, where they literally called your company and said, "Hey, man, can you just sell me a card directly?" And you just mandated we're going to keep doing the same business we're doing.
That's correct. We had tons of people calling in and asking to buy GPUs directly, and we need to take care of our customers. I mean, that's what we sell, PCs, not GPUs.
Chris Rich writes in and he says, "Hi, Wallace. Apart from customer demand and sales, what determines which CPUs and GPUs you offer? I see that most of your pre-builts come with AMD CPUs, which is somewhat atypical for a system integrator." He goes, Did the switch from Intel to AMD surprise you? Or I guess, did the decision you made to do that surprise you? You had to do it? I guess that's the question, really. And what trends are you currently seeing? How much interest is there for Intel GPUs? That's a different question. And I guess he's saying, when did that switch happen to providing a lot of Zen CPUs instead of Intel? What made you decide to do that? And has that changed recently with like Alder Lake's release?
I'm assuming he's speaking about the pre-configured systems, because those are static configurations that ship within a quick time frame.
Like the standard one
yeah.
pre-built that you'd recommend. Yeah.
So like we don't have any specific deals with the silicon manufacturers to carry a certain amount or sell a certain amount of anything. Configurations are literally determined by us and our customers, right? And meaning, if we look at every price point, right, and we look at every price point for each configuration, and we ship the best hardware that fits that price point, that adds the most amount of value to our customers. Now, and then also based on customer data and demand, right? So like we keep the analytics on everything that we sell, and we look at the market and we say like what's the most popular of something, right? We look at that, we look at price points, we look at performance. And obviously, we qualify everything. So, AMD just made a lot of sense in our pre-configured systems. Now that Intel 12th Gen is around, there might be some Intel mixed in there too. But we basically ship what we think is the best in our pre-configured systems. Now, if you want something very specific, we offer customized systems, right, where you can go and customize your computer to your liking, and you can mix and match whatever you want. But so there's like a combination of criterias, and there's a certain amount of data that we look at for us to come up with those configurations. It's not just out of the blue, and it's definitely not because of any type of deal or anything like that. That's just how we do it.
Well, so I'm really curious though, because this type of like discussion about like mind share and popularity fascinates me, because at least before I started this channel, one thing that I would often argue about in the Tom's Hardware forums and stuff is just like, I couldn't believe there'd always be these products like this one here is clearly better, and yet twice as many people are buying this one. Like, and I think a lot of it is mind share, like what people perceive as the best is different sometimes than what's the best. I'm guessing when Zen, and I don't know if you remember exactly, but I'm guessing when Zen first came out, it wasn't like immediate that everyone wanted AMD as much as Intel or something, right? Or like, when did that start happening?
The second gen, I think Zen 2 is when it was clear that AMD, they were strong. Right, they're offering a strong competition, and also based on the reviews. Right, you just had to look at just read the reviews, like literally watch channels on YouTube and read every review, from known publications. You'll see, right, like this is clearly X is better than Z in certain ways, right, and then obviously it goes by us too. Like we look at each individual component and say, what would I want at a certain price point? Like what do we think makes sense? And that's kind of how we determine, what to sell.
But you see, this is what interests me too, because I remember, again, if you wanted the strongest, specifically only for gaming CPU in like 2018, 9900K was the fastest one. It was, but it was the top one. And if you went down the stack, oftentimes, I mean, AMD was literally, I remember doing one of my first videos about it. Like, the point I made was the fact that the 2700X is even being compared to the 9900K is absurd. It's like 20% weaker for less than half the price. It'd be like comparing, what did I say back then? It'd be like comparing, like a 3070 to a 3080 Ti. The price difference, like, these are just different tiers. Like, so I do feel like there was kind of this like rolling momentum that had to catch up. I'm wondering though, because when I talk to people now, AMD has a lot of clout. Like, people say, I want an AMD laptop, I want an AMD system. Has that, and I guess I don't know, I'm guessing you don't have like the percentage of sales up in front of you, but it's like, are you seeing a shift happening back to Intel that's like really big? Because I'll say it, I'm not afraid to. I think Alder Lake, Intel's current generation, is the one to get for most people right now. I think that might change later this year, but I think Intel has finally swung back. Are you seeing a big shift, or is it still about the proportion of where it was about a year ago between AMD to Intel?
Intel's definitely, gaining market share again, that lost market share. To your, first part of your question where you talked about like, people trusting AMD. I think there was a period where people had to learn to trust AMD again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they had to, where consumer confidence had to build up. And, it started with the first generation where AMD clearly showed value in the architecture. But for the longest time, they didn't compete with Intel, right? It just didn't make any sense. So for like years, I remember where people were saying that Intel was suffering a case of incrementalism, I believe. That was the thing, because they kept on moving at a slow pace because they didn't have to move, right?
The decade of quad cores that are 5% better every year. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you think about it from a business standpoint, that they did what they had to do because there was no competition. So when AMD launched, first gen Ryzen, I think that, like, people are like, wow, it didn't really necessarily do a clean sweep, but this is really good value, right? There's a lot more cores for the money. There's no crazy issues. The chipsets are solid. And then like when Ryzen 2 came out, people are like, whoa. I mean, they closed that gap now. Now I'm not only getting more cores, but now the frequency gap has been closed, right? The knobs were adjusted where the frequency can scale a bit more. So and that's when the really positive reviews started to come out. And then obviously that's when we started to see more and more demand for AMD CPUs. But for the longest time, like it was mostly Intel before that.
And how does it look for GPUs? Because it's funny, I was talking to Steve from Hardware Unboxed a few months ago about this, and I think me and him were kind of coming to the same conclusion that, well, Radeon GPUs definitely are well regarded at this point in the enthusiast space compared to where they were, 5 years ago. I had someone install Google Fiber here, was very excited about that, and he actually seemed to know a lot about PCs. Like, he knew pretty specific hardware specs, and we were talking about it. And his question was, do you know like what the 4080, the 4070 is going to be like? And I'm like, are you at all interested in the 7800 XT? And he's like, oh, I don't even really know what that is. So it's like, even a lot of I think we underestimate how much Mindshare Nvidia actually has. Like, and like, what are you seeing that change at all with RDNA 2? Because that was a huge change in how competitive Radeon was compared to previous gens.
Definitely. And RDNA 2, it's a good product, right? At the end of the day, it's a really good product. So it's kind of like the CPU, right? Like, it's going to take some time before consumer confidence builds up. Across the board, meaning, whatever they have coming up next, I'm sure will be great. And also the console story is really good. I think a lot of people, the fact that they keep on reinstating that they're in every single console or major console, is an important one too, right? So I think they're fine tuning their marketing, and I think we definitely see an improvement from the first gen, and looking forward to their next generation.
So a question I want to bring up here is just kind of like the GPUs that system integrators, and if you have any insight to how it works at OEMs as well, like where the pricing comes from. Because I was looking at your configurator, and I saw that the difference in pricing between the graphics cards is pretty much what you would expect. Like what the 3060, I don't know, seems to like you add $100 or $150 on top of it or something to go from a 3050. And you know, you look at the 6900 XT Liquid Cool, it's a little cheaper than a 3090 Ti. All that makes sense to me. But every now and then there is something that differs. Like the 6800 seems a lot more expensive than in the do-it-yourself market. And the 3050 specifically, now I don't know if it's because it's the base system, so there's something going on with that, but it does seem like from when I talk to people, like the 3050 is significantly cheaper for OEM. So I just don't know how much insight, and we had a couple reader mails about it. I'm kind of condensing a few of them. Like where some of this pricing comes from, because sometimes it seems to be one-to-one with what's in the do-it-yourself space if you were buying it yourself. And sometimes it seems like there are some graphics cards that are clearly for OEMs, like the 3060 Ti and the 3050. I don't know how much insight you can give into like how that pricing works.
It's literally determined by the add-in board partner or the distributor that I'm buying from. Mm-hmm. So there's it doesn't get any clearer, any simpler than this. Like I buy for $1 and I need to add my margin so I can sell it on top of that, right? So if that GPU costs me $900, I'm gonna put on my margin so I can stay in business, right? And I'm gonna sell it. So you know, it's basically the market, right? There's no other explanation about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now on your website, I'm just curious. Like it shows like, you know, a box for a 3070, a box for a 6800 XT. Mm-hmm. Like, are these all Founders editions of the graphics cards, or like is there like a standard like MSI Asus or something you use? Like when someone clicks the 3060 bubble, are they going to get an MSI or an Asus, or is it always a Founders?
It's you know, it's going to be mostly Founders, you know, but we're a mix, right? Obviously, the reason why we don't specify exactly which GPUs is there, it's just because of the environment, right? There's no way that I can guarantee you're going to get a Founders, you know, and or a specific GPU
or an EVGA one or something.
An EVGA. You know, like we do qualify every single GPU. So like we'll qualify every single add-in board partner that we can buy. And if the airflow works, if the, you know, the weight of the GPU also works, everything else, you know, meets our criteria, it'll be added to the bucket, right? But you know, on the AMD side, there's no more reference designs, right? So it's mostly add-in board partner designs. But yeah, it's just like I said, it's a mix.
Yeah, I know that AMD, I think it seems like they're saving a lot of their reference designs for those drops they do on Thursdays from AMD.com. For the most part, it's all migrating to AIB at this point. Well, so let me ask you this question here, switching gears to a different type of product you sell. Queen Sweep writes in and he says, "Hey, Tom and Wallace. First, congrats to MAINGEAR for getting a positive review from Gamers Nexus from one of their pre-built videos. Second, what was it like to work with Intel and AMD on your laptops? I didn't even know they existed until I looked at your page again recently, and they seem to offer strong price performance in the current market." And I think there are a few laptop questions here because it is different than speccing out a desktop from a system integrator. Like, how did you start working on laptops? How did you select which ones you were going to carry as standard? How'd that even work?
Yeah, the laptop game is much different than obviously than we're all used to, right? Really, our first serious laptop design was, well, first of all, thanks for the Gamer Nexus comment. I appreciate that. But, you know, our laptop business really took off when we did our first design, which was with the Intel Queens County. That was a project, even though it was open up to other SIs, that actually came from me within the board of advisors. I'm part of the Intel board of advisors, and I presented the case for Intel to help us design a laptop. For your readers, if they don't know, like a laptop design can cost millions of dollars. And I just don't, you know, most companies my size just won't sell enough product to cover those costs, right? So we need to work with partners. We need to work with ODMs. We need to work or get as much help as we can to actually, you know, work on these notebooks, right? So, and we need to share the designs. So that's why you'll see, like, you know, for example, Queens County, like you saw other competitors of ours carry the same notebook. It's because it was a shared design. We had to share it with them, right? But just to be clear, that one specifically came from me within the Intel board of advisors. And then Intel said, "Look, we're gonna definitely support this project, but we're gonna have to open it up to other guys so we can make our money back because they made the investment, right?" So for notebooks, there's a series of complications, right? First of all, like aligning with the roadmap, with the silicon manufacturer's roadmap is one thing. Then you have everything else that's out of our control, right? Like you have, somebody else essentially is building the product in Taiwan or China or whatever. So it's like we try to control the quality as best as we can and qualify the best components we can inside our notebooks. That's what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I'm looking, you do carry AMD notebooks. I'm just wondering if there was any, I guess you kind of worked through someone, I forgot the word for it, someone else who's kind of like the basis of the laptop, then you work with them what needs to be on it to become a MAINGEAR laptop. Is there any difference in like preparing a standard Intel laptop to a standard AMD one, or was it kind of the same process for you from where you were in the chain?
It's the same process. Like we'll work with AMD, and obviously it's when AMD came up with their chips were very competitive and got reviewed really really well. I think the first design that came out was it was Asus, and like it got praised everywhere. But it's the same process, right? AMD will work with the ODM in China and us.
ODM was the word, yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll basically start the design process and the feedback process and the planning. It's just like a much longer road for us to get a notebook off the ground, and it doesn't always pay off.
Yeah, I know.
But these have been very successful. Just for the AMD designs have been very successful, specifically on Micro Center. They're selling very very well.
Oh yeah, and I mean, again, Intel actually still has a little bit to go in terms of the efficiency side of their laptops. Alder Lake still only seems to win if you clock it really fastly for a laptop chip. But I have been told by people who work at Best Buy as well that the AMD variants of their Asus laptops, they can't keep them in stock. Like, for a long time, I do think people just call up and say, I want an AMD laptop. But Bfish writes in, he says, "Hi, Wallace and Tom. My question is around the laptop space and working with Tongfeng, now Uniwil, I think. But he says, how much customization do you do? How do you differentiate your products from, say, electronics, who appear to have similar offerings, but with a different retail model? Do they ever consult with you in the product development phase? And how much market research did you do in the laptop space around consumer demand, specs, and features? Like, I've seen XMG be very active on Reddit and soliciting consumer feedback."
Yeah, we work very closely. So Tongfeng is one of our ODMs, right? And we have to work very closely with them. We just don't buy the final product here in the US and slap our logo on it. It doesn't. I think some companies do that, but you can tell by the actual. If you look at the notebook, and you can tell by the actual unboxing experience, right? Like if a notebook is shipped to you in a cardboard box, and like the bottom sticker just doesn't say the company name, and you can tell that they just bought it and put like a sticker on it and sold it to you. But in our case, because of the volumes that we've been shipping lately, and ever since, really Queens County was the notebook that kind of defined our notebook roadmap or notebook success, I would say. We've been working very closely with the ODMs to make sure that we qualify, we design, feedback, etc.
So, sort of a transition question between the laptop subject to a new one. Mustang 3060 Ty writes in, and he says, "As an avid fan of gaming laptops, I feel like it kind of sucks that we're always constrained by thermal temperatures. The laws of physics can be a bitch." He says, "It's quite clear that as GPUs get more powerful, TDP also tends to increase. How challenging do you think it will be to cool high-end laptops, especially considering the next gen of GPUs is expected to have a significant increase in power consumption?"
So, I don't know if that statement of TDPs always, on the rise is necessarily true. If you look at, different generations, like you'll have like notebooks that, that the TDP was lowered, whenever the node process dropped, right, or improved. But essentially like the notebook. It's you have to view it as a package. You can't
Mm-hmm.
view it as just the TDP and the GPU, right? Don't forget that the manufacturing process improves on the CPU as well, right, and on the chipset. So like overall, you have power consumption or savings there,
So you're saying
and
like the chipset has a reduced power consumption, the SSDs keep getting more efficient, so maybe there's just excess
e-
room
e-
now.
exactly. So like as a whole, you look at it as a package, and then that's how you design a notebook. And you say, okay, so if I have, I don't know, a 100 watts, GPU and a 50 watt CPU, then maybe we can bump the GPU up, a couple more watts, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
like you kind of balance it out that way to essentially achieve what you want to achieve. Which for mostly what we've noticed is that gamers really keep their notebooks plugged in, right,
Mm-hmm.
when they're gaming. So battery life is less of a concern than what you would think. Um, and so there's a lot of variables that are involved when designing a notebook. And I wouldn't agree that power consumption is going to keep on going on the rise. Now it might that might be a fact for desktop, sure,
Mm-hmm.
because we have the thermal headroom on the desktop. We have the power, enough power, right? As long as your socket can supply enough juice to the product you're plugging in. So let's design the best performing product for that. So like power concerns are much less on the desktop side, but I don't think notebooks are going to continue to go up in power.
Yeah, I've got to say that I just think there's a difference between what Nvidia specifically and a little bit AMD is going to do with their TDPs next generation relative with laptop and desktop, because I think there's no way around it. I mean, a 65-watt limit is a 65-watt limit for a mid-range laptop GPU, and I know Nvidia is moving to 5 or even 4 nanometer for Lovelace. So I mean, there's no way around it. Over Samsung's 8 nanometer, I think you can expect them to have at least 50% higher efficiency, which means at least 50% higher performance in every tier in laptops by early next year. In desktop, I think some people hear that and they're like, oh, they're going to have like 50% higher efficiency, probably better than that, actually. And that means that if they have like a 500-watt GPU, it must be like 3 times stronger. And it's like, no, it's 50% if it's in the right, efficiency curve. On desktop, that extra 200 watts might only add 20% more performance or something like that. But that is something I want to talk about here. That's why I said that was a transitional question. Like, I'm confident, that I'd say this, I'm 100% confident the RTX 4090 is going to use at least 400 watts. Now, am I 100% confident it'll use 600? No, I kind of doubt that actually, but I think it's going to be between 450 and 600 most likely. And I think AMD is aiming for about 400 watts for their top card, between 375 and 450. So not as crazy as NVIDIA, but, like Vega liquid amounts of power. I wonder if you have any thoughts for your pre-built systems about just specifically, like, let's just say it's a 500-watt card. Like, if you have any thoughts about, like, how you'll handle that, if it will present any challenges to your, pre-built desktops or what?
Yeah, I definitely cannot confirm or deny anything concerning future products that are
You
from other
probably could if
companies.
you really wanted to, but go on, because they talk to you, but go on.
I definitely cannot. But what I can tell you is we work very closely, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to work very closely with the silicon manufacturers to make sure that we are ready and time to market with their latest and greatest, right? So like sizes will vary, power consumption will vary, heat dissipation will vary, and it's very rare that that a surprise product pops up without us
Mm-hmm.
knowing that it will pop up,
Because
and
that'd be
we're not
stupid. No
and we're not
company
ready
would
for
do
it.
that, right? Like, NVIDIA wouldn't launch a 500-watt card and be like, surprise. Like, they're going to let you know way ahead of time so you can make sure your systems are spec'd out correctly.
You'd be surprised, but
Oh, okay.
there are corner cases, right? But yeah, for the most part, like everyone does a really good job to make sure that the system integrators and the OEMs are ready to make sure that their products is for sale day one.
Yeah, I mean, there's already, like, 500 watt RTX 3090 Ti's with air cooling. Granted, they're like twice as thick as a normal card, but it works. So we know they can do it with the right design. I'm wondering though if you guys have put any thought or testing into like where you would become concerned. Obviously, I don't think a company would launch something they don't think they could do well. But like, I wonder, like, because for me, my guess is the limit is about 500 to 600 watts. Like, what I don't, like, there were these rumors of 800 watt cards, and I just said no, it's not how thermodynamics works. Like, but I am wondering if you guys have put thought into at what level you would have to fundamentally change how you organize a case or something, because they're already built to cool probably far more than what they can already cool. But like, I wonder what level would you, and feel free to just say 1,000. I don't know. Like, I wonder at what level you would really worry.
I mean, I think we have to give them a little bit more credit than that. I think they know that their GPUs will get will be combined with the CPU and the rest of the components in the system. So I think the limitation is literally the amount of power that the U.S. household can output through a socket. So that's how you have to look at it, right? Like, I mean,
so like about 1,800 watts if you have a crazy good power supply.
Well, it's not just the power supply; it's the actual physical outlet before you start tripping breakers. Like, I mean, man, we've sold three-way SLI systems in the past that would trip breakers. Like,
do you remember which card it was?
I believe it was the GX 480. I believe.
Well, that was the craziest one. But is that? I'm just wondering how do I put this? The lowest TDP triple SLI systems you sold where you got calls about tripping a breaker? Like, did it also happen with the 580? Does it just happen in general if there was a triple card system?
I think it wasn't, and these are corner cases in older homes, right? That are probably, just the electrical system is probably aging or whatever. But,
and if I may, power supplies are way better now too. I think you've got to remember that when you say, oh, I've got a 400 watt GPU, I've got a 200 watt CPU, and then I add 100 watts. It's like, yes, so now you're at like, 700 watts there. But keep in mind that the power supply isn't perfectly efficient. So you actually, even if it's a high quality power supply, you need to add 10% to that, to how much it's pulling from the wall. It's not perfectly efficient.
Way more
Back
efficient
then,
now.
though, they were like 70% efficient half the time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Less efficient power supplies. Now, obviously, if you're either building or if you're buying that caliber of PC, well, you can't even buy three-way SLI anyway, right? So, or even SLI, but if you were to buy something like that, you would probably assume that the person building that type of system would, get the best power supply they can, right? Like a really highly efficient power supply. Or the system integrator would make sure that they ship you a really good power supply with a system like that caliber. So, but yeah, I mean, look, back to your question, was really the limitation is the amount of power that can be outputted from your socket. I think that's the ceiling.
Well, yeah, my biggest concern though with that is, okay, let's say your system's using 1,000 watts, 1,100 after the power supply factor for efficiency. Oh, yeah, okay, but what if you have a monitor that uses 100 watts? Most monitors don't, but plenty of high-end ones do. And then what if you also have a TV on in the room? Do you have a window air conditioner? Probably, if it's a graphics card using that much energy. That's the thing that I wonder about, is not so much just pulling from one thing. Like
a breaker.
Yeah, I remember at my parents' house, they had for some reason, wherever they decided to plug in this Christmas tree, inflatable Christmas tree that was out front this last holiday season. Like, when they had that on and the speakers and a big TV on, they started tripping one of the breakers. And I was like, oh yeah, that's an inflatable tree. It inflates with a fan. Wait, it's just like you have a vacuum cleaner on 24/7. How much energy are you guys wasting with this $50 Christmas decoration in terms of energy all day? And it's stuff like that. Like, if someone turns on a vacuum, well, because you have to think it's probably not like 1,800 watts for the whole PC. That's the limit. The limit's probably like 500, 600 below that for most rooms, actually. So I do think that there's a limit at about 600 watts, even just for pulling from the wall.
We would hope that would be the the mindset and then the thought process. But yeah, I mean, look, it's I was just obviously speaking holistically here, right? Like my point is I don't think there's a hardcore limitation right now as to how much wattage their GPU can consume. If there's a market for it, and if there's a market that's willing to pay for a 500 or 600 watt GPU, and if that GPU performs, I think Nvidia has the right, or AMD has the right to design something like that to satisfy the market.
Well, at the very least, what we can say is if you had a triple 480 system, GTX 480 tripping breakers, that card used like 320 watts, I believe. But in SLI, typically they're at like 90% usage. So I think the limit is definitely at most 1,000 then. I think we can just say from your experience there. This piece of content is brought to you by XREArt. XREArt frames disassembled phones, handheld consoles, and other electronics to create incredibly cool discussion pieces for enthusiasts. These pieces include iPhones, PSPs, Game Boys, Apple Watches, old Nokias, and more. XREArt also sells the tools, frames, and templates for you to do it yourself and donates 0.5% of each purchase to NGOs for environmental protection projects, which, they aren't throwing these devices in landfills, guys. They're actually using them in a sustainable way. And looking at a piece of XREArt in person, it's really cool. And you can support Moore's Law is Dead by clicking on the link in the description and using the offer code BrokenSilicon to save 10% off on your order. Support this cool company and support Moore's Law is Dead by buying XREArt today. All right. Tired Gaming Dad writes in. He says, "Hi, Tom and Wallace. MAINGEAR is a brand I've been looking at for over 10 years. Up until lately, I've always enjoyed building my own PC, though. The builds are just very pretty and clean on your website. What are your thoughts, though, about the Steam Deck versus desktop versus laptop in general? I'm still waiting on my Steam Deck here in Q2, and it looks like it might, and I really like it for when I travel for work. If the Steam Deck / SteamOS really take off, unlike the previous Debian-based SteamOS years back, would MAINGEAR look into making their own version of a Steam Deck? Any thoughts as to what hardware, screen size type you'd want to see in the next version or in a MAINGEAR deck? Thank you both." And yeah, I think that's worth pointing out. Every now and then people ask me like, "Oh, could this Intel APU be used in the Steam Deck?" And I'm like, they use AMD, and then I remember, oh yeah, it's an open standard. Anyone, according to Valve, can make a Steam Deck. So is that something you guys have thought about?
Yes, we actually, evaluated designs. I'm gonna call it like Switch-like designs. For years now, it's always been honestly like a dream
before
of mine.
Before the Steam Deck, even
before the Steam Deck, yeah. We have actually working samples here and prototypes here in our office that are older than, based on Intel actually.
Yeah, probably Tiger Lake ones and Ice Lake maybe.
And what prevented us from always moving forward was the experience, right? That the user would get when they actually received the product. And hardware aside, it was really the OS experience, right? Like, it just does not make any sense to ship a device like that with Windows in it. And if there's one company in the world that can actually create a portable gaming device like that, it would be Valve, because they can control, right? They can control the experience from beginning to end. So the hardware, yes, which can be done, but then the software, right? So like, the fact that they're using a custom version of Linux, it requires very little keyboard or mouse input, right? So like in our version that we had, our working prototypes here, we had the control sticks to act as a virtual mouse. In Windows, and it just sucked, man. I'm like, there's no way we're gonna launch this as a product, and this person's gonna like get this and have a good experience. So we ended up just canning it. So we're gonna basically wait a little bit and see how the market reacts. And I'm crossing my fingers that it'll be very successful. So more designs from company like mine and others will come out in the market in the future. But yes, like Valve does have, it is open source, so we can ship SteamOS. We haven't spoken to them recently about it, but it's I love it. I personally love the way the Steam Deck came out, and I think it's a great first attempt. I'm crossing my fingers that it's going to continue to be a success and that we can actually innovate in that space. But from a Windows standpoint, we just can't ship that design with Windows. It just doesn't work. Or the other dream would be that Microsoft would finally open up and it would wake up and smell the coffee and let us ship Xbox OS.
Oh, don't get me started. I do not know why they haven't tried that yet, you know?
Right? I think it's a huge untapped opportunity for them
Mm,
to, by allowing us to ship Xbox OS, you know, and just a strict gaming device with control sticks. That would be, I think it would be amazing.
hmm Yeah, that always is the problem, right? Like when I've looked at reviews where I mean, I remember I watched one recently online as Tech Tips where they're looking at it. And it's just like at the end of the day, in its perfect implementation, one of those Tiger Lake portable devices was really cool, but half of the games just had issues. It was a nightmare to control the UI from the desktop. And it's like, and also they're not that small all the time. Sometimes those like kind of Kickstarter ones are, but it's like at a certain point, it's not that much more portable than a laptop. I really, I don't know. I really wish there was more innovation. I agree. It's the operating system that would really allow it.
Yeah, it's that's what's holding us back from actually innovating in those form factors right now.
All right, so I've got one final discussion point here that I had to bring up, and I actually made a whole list because I just wanted to kind of remind myself even what's about to happen here to this market. I'm going to read it because this is and I think this is all correct. I don't know if I had like but this is basically when I believe these products are launching over the next 2 years. Over the next 2 years, meaning we're in quarter two, 2022. So I mean until, like 2020, early 2024. So 2 years from this quarter. All right. In quarter two or three, we're getting Intel Alchemist finally. And then quarter three this year, we're getting Intel Raptor Lake. In quarter three this year, we're getting Nvidia Lovelace, I believe. In quarter 3, 4 this year, we're getting Zen 4. In quarter four this year, we're getting RDNA 3. In quarter 1 or 2 of next year, I'll have a leak coming about it soon. We're going to get Intel Meteor Lake, not just in laptop, by the way, probably. And then in quarter 3 and 4 of next year, we'll get Zen 5. Quarter 4 of next year, we'll get Arrow Lake next to Zen 5. Quarter 4 of next year, we should get Intel Battlemage. And then in quarter 1 of the following year, we'll get RDNA 4, and I would presume a quarter after that, we'll get NVIDIA Blackwell. That's 11, I count here, major architecture releases in 2 years. And just to put that in perspective for everybody, because you need the perspective, in 2020, we had Ampere, RDNA 2, Zen 3, Comet Lake, arguably Tiger Lake 2. If you count Tiger Lake, that's 5 major releases in 2020, a year that most people say was one of the craziest years of hardware ever. We're going to get more than double. I wonder if you have any thoughts on how many releases are coming down the pipeline, because it's like every quarter. Is there even one quarter where we're gonna miss? I guess Meteor Lake may have a little space to itself, but it's gonna be next to RDNA 3 launches anyways. It seems like every quarter we're getting 2 major releases over the next 2 years.
I would love to comment on the releases.
I don't need you to comment on if it's true or not, but I'm more asking like, is this going to change how you think about, like, honestly, because this is a lot to keep track of if you run a business that sells these products.
Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of what we do. We are going to make sure that we qualify the products, and we're going to make sure that we're ready and we're time to market whenever there's a new release of a new GPU, CPU, or piece of silicon. So, you know, that's actually hard for the bigger guys, right? Like the tier one OEMs like HP and Dell. That's probably more difficult for them. But for a company like MAINGEAR, we're very swift, right? Like we're testing everything, in a timely manner, and we're going to be time to market with whatever gets released.
Well, I remember talking to a counterpart at one of the major OEMs. I guess I won't say which one, but it's as big as Lenovo or HP or whatever. Like he said that they just skipped what was it? Rocket Lake because it was so close. It was in between Alder Lake. Came out the same year as Alder Lake, technically. Comet Lake was 6 months before it. They didn't think Rocket Lake was really worth it, so they just skipped Rocket Lake. Like, and a lot of companies did do that too, I noticed. Like when you see this, so it's like, so what? We're getting Zen 4 the end of this year with Raptor Lake, and then half a year after that, we're going to get Meteor Lake already. Like, is there going to be a point where you're like, you know what? We're only carrying Zen 4 and we're going to skip Raptor Lake and do Meteor Lake on laptop. I'm wondering if you've thought about if that will make any sense, especially too now because we're going to get a third GPU manufacturer. Well, allegedly, it's still not out really, and that might even complicate things more.
Yeah, look, if it makes sense, we're gonna carry it. Unless there's like some type of issue or there's some type of like weird overlap or something between the product stacks. But um, my goal here is to make sure that I am time to market with the latest and greatest, with a very well qualified, very well designed and engineered product on our website, with you know with whatever is exciting that's out in the market.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say the giant OEMs have the bigger problem. It's just because it's such high volume. They make their own motherboards, and so that slows it down. So they really need to verify so many custom parts. Is that
Their
why?
their their processes are different, yeah, very different than ours, right? I mean, we're carrying off the shelf components and everything that we're selling. We're not customizing anything. So, like, for a tier one guy to actually move swiftly, it's nearly impossible, right? There's also, and because they're launching custom motherboards, there's different types of testing, like the
Mm-hmm.
EMI testing and everything else that goes along with it, and that takes a ton of time. So, like
And
in our
Linus
case,
ran into issues with Dell's motherboards firmware too. So it isn't easy to test well either.
yeah, yeah. So like, it's just a different product. We're buying components that were already qualified and tested and have the proper certifications from day one, right? So we're not in the motherboard business. We're in the system
Hmm.
integration business, and we're gonna continue to stay there. But yeah, like I said, it's that's the value that we bring to the table as well, is to make sure that we sell a high quality product. That we're time to market with a very high quality product.
Well, I mean, honestly, another part of this question or this discussion for me here is, are you excited, man? I mean, I think look at this. Look at the competition. Look at how many releases. It's gonna be hard for me to keep track of, and it's my job. Like,
Yeah.
I think, I really think we're going to get a quadrupling of performance in about 2.5 from now. Whatever is out, we will have things 4 times better because none of these generations, I'm told, aren't decent upgrades. So if you see that many innovations in 2 years, I think it's going to feel like the 90s again.
I'm very stoked. I mean, I'm super excited just because competition is good. Everybody wins. The businesses win, the consumer wins. There's choices, right? It seems like this, the supply chain issue will resolve itself
Hmm.
by then as well.
I'll probably have a
So
video come out before this podcast that goes into that. That's another thing, just not to cut you off, but I really think the supply chain thing it's gonna get way better this summer, I believe, especially
it
early summer.
it's already getting better. I mean, we
Hmm.
we we see it already. So like, yeah, it's good times ahead, right? Like we're pumped, and like I said, I feel very fortunate that till today I still do what I love, and we're held in high regard by the community, which is great.
All right, man. Well, that's all I had here on the discussion list. We got through it in a somewhat timely manner, I think. Is there anything else you want to discuss, ask me, bring up? I mean, we can talk about anything you want a little bit. I don't know. Is there anything we didn't cover that you thought we would, or?
No, yeah, amazing questions. They're very well put together, and your community too. It seems like these guys are hardcore about the space, so they're very detailed. So yeah, like I said, I just appreciate the fact that you took some time to speak with me, and I'm looking forward to hearing the podcast over when it goes live.
Oh, yeah. I mean, e- at least I've found for myself, just talking to a different groups of people that actually work on this stuff gets you out of a bubble of thought so that you actually think differently. And I really appreciated getting the insight from you being in charge of one of these larger companies, especially one that actually gets good reviews on like some of the others. That was really good to be able to talk to you. I mean, we're dancing around it then. Go ahead and I assume you have one website to plug before you get off, right?
Sure, sure. Definitely visit www.maingear.com, right? And if you want to follow me on Twitter, just look for Santos_Wallace with two L's. And yeah, if you have any questions, just hit me up.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on. Thanks to everybody for listening. Go to your podcast app of choice, subscribe on 10 phones at once so we get 10 times the downloads. Give us some reviews. That really does help. And of course, subscribe to the Moore's Law Dead YouTube channel and look for the Patreon. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for listening. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator,
Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels:
Brad Mellon, Drita Full, AV, Anthony Greffa, Greg Pataki, Mohammed Al-Kharari, Brett Jones, Aaron Close, BBC 6800 XD, Big Sexy, Jan Rounder, Daniel Hyde, Ivan K., Brian Regelman, Joaquin Hagan, Sam Miller, Deke, Thomas Rupp, The Mechanical Philosopher, Terrence Herod, SNES Calmers, Tom Bailey, Greg T. Wanchuk, Andrew S., Dane Galanowski, Daniel D., MJB1, Eric Jackson, Justice Brendan, Sammy Good, Valco Maleb, The Boss Haas, I Love You, Lynn and Jim, Spam G. Spam Jim, Jonathan, Jeremy So, General Drips, Blake, Franco Frederic, Matthew Lazier, Jensen Wang, Nathan Mose, Zuriz, Gregory S. Acker, Dominique Koch, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, My Name is Nobody, Caillou Markelli, HardForum.com, Original Ross Licky, Stefan, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Christopher A. Butler, Jeremy Scalen, Sarcastro, Stephen Hart, Jason B., Meat and Pork Stew, Tim Robb, Luis Correa, Ian Clifford, Jesse Jaskowiak, Travis Gooding, Holden Mobley, Nanyan, Chris Rich, Deepest Learners, Mad, Zutsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael Magee, Benjamin Oshley, Sammy Malas, Greg, Trini, Patrick Groh, Amiable Chief, Brett Summersdale, Russell, Arcane 311, Tommy, Kundin, Brucha, Mark Mitchell, John Wissig, Delmaine Peterson, James Anderson, Y. Trui, Mark Raidmaker, Falling from Sky, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Buma, Narethiel, Matthew Landavazo, Stefan Koladik, Henry Zhang, Judson N, F7 GOS, The Grid, Michelle Pell, D31337, Antics, Silvanos, Noah Nicoela, Hexapuma, Chrysantine, Paolo Zegartowski, Zabeat 03, D. Sis, Thomas A. Teef, Jean de Bont, DNA Tech, 50C Desert, Axel Ciceros, Royce Mayer, Charles Russell, Reginald R.E., MOR F1 US, Teak Autumn, Jackson Miller, Jess M.H., Sandy Garrido Saunderson, David Eastland, Fire Falcon on YouTube, Andra at Jacques, Gaiman Since Reagan, Jeff Sedler, Eric Osborne, Loophole, Winstar Joker, James I. Router, Corey Leonard, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.